right. Well, thank you, Steve, for inviting me here to do a presentation. And thank you to the chamber.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's my preferences. Okay, so hopefully we can edit the video.
Oh yeah, no problem. And, I'll make sure everybody
Okay.
We're not talking about technology today too. So.
Good. Yeah, just like the last time when my earpiece fell out while I was talking. So yeah, live lunch and learn. But yeah, okay. So Steve, thank you very much for having me back. Thank you to the chamber. I joined the chamber, I don't know, probably close to about a year and a half ago, about a year ago. Probably a little less than that, but I moved to Lake Forest about a year and a half ago and joined the chamber shortly thereafter at the first event of the Civic Center. So, and my younger son actually goes to Santa Margarita High School, so I am well familiar with RSM Harrison, and actually one of his baseball coaches last year was a Visconti. So kind of interesting that I have Visconti joining us here. Not sure if there's any relation, but definitely a familiar name. So anyways, let's talk about, do you really know your brand? And I like this group that we have. Not only is it a small group that we can get a lot done and talk about a lot of things, but I think the mix of business owners and marketers and people that are actually executing on that side, I think this is going to be hopefully helpful to you, and then hopefully I'm able to get some good feedback to sort of improve what I'm doing on my end. So let's talk about, do you really know your brand? Steve already talked about who I am, VP of Marketing and Brand Development for Aeronet Worldwide. We are a logistics and shipping company headquartered in Irvine. I also have my own consultancy through Big Fly Ideation, do branding and marketing there. My background is that I have 23 years of experience in marketing and branding. So anywhere from agency to corporates to consultants, I've kind of hit all of those markers there. Worked with brands in a number of spaces, including beauty, nutrition, logistics currently, medical, manufacturing, personal development, fashion, events, nonprofit, just kind of all over the map. And a lot of that comes from working in an agency environment, working in a consultancy, where you are able to experience a lot of different verticals, and it helps really broaden your skill set that way. I have a lot of hands-on experience in strategy, management, and the execution side. I'm a bit of a unicorn these days, where in an era of specialization, people seem to be either on the strategy side, or they seem to be management, or they seem to be strictly execution. I have seen it kind of come up through the ranks and with companies that had a need for all of this. And I've also been curious enough and wanting to get my hands dirty so that I understood both sides of things, not just from the strategy side, but also how is it executed and what's possible on that end, so that we're not over promising, under delivering. And as well, you're also able to become familiar with the tools and the tactics, which are constantly changing. So if you're not constantly changing with that in this industry, you're going to be quickly left behind. So let's start off talking about, what is branding? A lot of people kind of mistake marketing and branding for the same thing. So let's talk about the differences between those two. Branding defines the company, what makes it unique in the marketplace, what it stands for, and how it's conveyed to your core audience. Marketing, on the other hand, is the set of tools and tactics used to connect an audience with a brand. Marketing utilizes trends, but branding should endure. So if you want to think of it as, marketing is temporary, trendy, but branding should be forever. Marketing may get your brand noticed, but if the branding and its value proposition are not solid, that attention will eventually fade. Now, the key elements of branding you always need to consider: number one, right off the top, you need to incorporate your main business strategy. So obviously, a lot of us, when we start a business, we've got our business plan, we have our business strategy, and that comes right at the front of any marketing, any sort of operational activities. But you need to make sure that that business strategy is baked into your branding. Identify your value proposition. Very simple. You know what makes your company or your service special. You know what you are trying to sell on its value side. Identify your target audience, which I'm sure everybody does. More importantly, develop personas. We can all sort of identify the X amount of customers that we expect with our business. It's by developing personas, we are kind of putting a fake name and a fake face to who that customer is. And sort of developing this persona, we're able to kind of better sell to them and understand their needs and to be able to execute on that level. Next, we determine our core visual elements. And this is anything from the logo to the colors to packaging, just anything visual that you want to establish up front, because consistency is going to be key once you start carrying that out. Along with the core visual elements, messaging and company voice. And I know, Linda, you're probably very in tune with this and how important it is with the messaging and the company voice, making sure that is wrapped into your or closely associated with your core visual elements and is consistent as well. Developing your initial branding vehicle, and 99% of the time, it's going to be your website. Very few businesses operate solely on social. I mean, I would say obviously more and more today, but your website really is your core branding vehicle, your initial branding vehicle. All efforts should point back to there, especially if that is your main marketplace. Now you want to create your marketing plan. And this is where we're talking about the tools and the tactics, also determining which marketing channels are best for your audience. Again, tying in into your personas that you've created prior. And then here's the easy part, executing the marketing plan. Easy. Analyzing the activity and modifying as needed. And with that comes a reevaluation of your marketing plan and the brand perception. And it's good to do sort of an annual review on that. Now we talked about the key elements of branding. Do you really know your brand? And this is something that we all have to kind of sit down and have a look in the mirror, especially if we own our own company. So revisiting some of the key elements of branding, the value proposition. You can state what makes your company unique, but do you truly believe it? If you don't, neither will your customers. With your target audience, are you honest about who your customers really are? If not, you're going to be wasting your time. Don't be afraid of owning a niche. Don't try to be all things to all people. Many successful businesses, and sure a lot of you know, that you don't have to go after the big fish in order to be profitable, in order to be relevant. So just be real about who your customers are. And then if it's a small slice of the pie, own it. The visual elements, messaging, and company voice, these all need to be conveyed consistently. As I said, don't get sloppy with your visual brand, the type of messaging and the tone of voice. Develop standards and be meticulous about them. This has to be done. I see some laughing there, but yes, this has to be done consistently, because there is definitely something real about how your brand sounds, about the tone of voice that it uses. With your website, your company vehicle, ensure it's fully developed and fully representative of your company. All marketing will lead back to here. So make sure it's not done halfway.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
I just want to go back to the point you had about the visual elements, messaging, company voice.
Yep.
Because I see this quite frequently, and a lot of times it's with people who have solo practices where they are the spokesperson, the figurehead for the company. And you go on your website and you see a lot of really aggressive language, real hard-boiled, headers and things that are kind of almost forcing you to go to the, click the link or sign up or do something of that nature. And then they go and put a video on the same page, and you click on the video, and the personality of the individual on the video, the owner, doesn't look anything like the written text that's under that. And so when I see that, that makes me, I'm wondering, okay, which one's the real person?
Yeah, so that's an interesting case, because what you're doing, say in a case like that, in a case like, I'm going to call it Harrison here because he has his own practice, and you're almost evolving a personal brand into a corporate brand. So if it's the person, if it's the personality, if it's the experience, you really have to be honest and real about who you are. And if there is something that you really want to put on display and be yourself, go ahead and do it. That is a lot of the appeal sometimes when you have an individual and you're trying to evolve a personal brand into a corporate brand, and then make sure that your messaging is consistent, that it supports the person that you see. So that's basically, that's my takeaway from that. Okay. So moving on. Lastly, let's talk about the marketing channels and tactics. You need to ensure you are putting your efforts and your investment into the right marketing channels. Know your customers reside, and don't waste resources with the wrong activities in the wrong places. So understand your attention graph, if you will, whether it be for your company, for your industry, and make sure you're really focusing your efforts in that place. Let's talk about branding from the inside out. Now, what does that mean? Loyal customers are obviously the best brand evangelists, but did you know, so are your employees? Ensure that your internal culture and training includes teaching them how to really know your brand. Informed and happy employees can exude the best qualities of a brand on a different level. And so that's definitely relating to social and the engagement that goes along with that. Encourage them, but don't order them. It has to be organic, but encourage them to engage with your social media and the content. When they do so, it expands your reach and reaffirms your brand identity. People from the outside see that if your internal employees really believe it and they're engaging with it, then it really reinforces the brand and makes the consumer feel better about doing business with it. And now a shameless plug, like Steve said, VP of Marketing for Aeronet Worldwide. Since '82, we have been a family-owned company dedicated to providing the best in global logistics solutions. We have associates and partners connected to every major airport and seaport throughout the world. And so one way or another, we will make it happen. And then my consultancy, Big Fly Ideation, I basically attempt to be an extension of your company, especially if you do not have the budget to hire an agency that's in a big skyrise, who are all probably working from home anyways. Contact me and see what we can do to help. And there's my contact information there, Mautino at either aeronet.com or bigflyideation.com. And of course, I welcome you to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's it. Any questions?
Yes, if anybody has a question, just take off your mic. We're a small enough group, you can just speak up. All right, Kevin, let me open it up. And I want to get back to a part that you talked about at the end about making sure that your employees are kind of brand ambassadors. All right.
Mhm.
One of the things that I think is become problematic for companies with employees is that they want to make sure that the employee showing up on social media is representing the brand and not detracting from the brand. And you probably know where I'm going with this, with people on their own personal profiles that like to kind of rant about all things political, social, economic, whatever the case may be. And sometimes that can be diametrically opposed to what the company's image and brand looks like. So if you want your employees to be brand ambassadors, how and where do you have them do that so that people are seeing what they're saying about the company separate from their own personal opinions that might detract from the company?
That is a very good point. And yes, definitely a slippery slope when it comes to identifying individuals with companies and the old line of, these are my opinions and do not represent those of the company I work for. I think when it comes down to it, if you are really getting, if you really want to get your employees engaged, you almost have to have an internal workshop that talks about how to properly do it. And again, you don't want to direct them exactly what to do. You just more want to guide them as to what to not do. And so, yes, what you want them to do is to share. What you want them to do is comment on pieces, because once they share, let's say on LinkedIn, if they share, that's going to show up in the feed of people that are connected with them. And so they'll see an article, they'll click on it. Where that slippery slope does come into play is if they say, if it's somebody from the outside who doesn't know that person, they see the company update, then they look at the person, and then they see a posting history that they think, let's say it is political, and they might make the association of, well, if they think that, is that what the company thinks? That is, I think in a way that comes down to just good social media practices for us all, that if you're going to be political, if you're going to be controversial, have at it, but just know that there are certain repercussions that will come about it. And if you're going to be one of those people, perhaps you don't want them engaging with your brand as much. Obviously, kind of a sensitive way to say, oh yeah, Mark and Julie, you guys are fine, but hey, Dave, come here, let me talk to you. How about you not post what we're doing? Because I don't want people seeing what your feed looks like. I don't know exactly, honestly, I don't know exactly how you broach that, but I think for the most part, you want
Kevin,
people to stay away. Yeah.
I think your idea of, as a company, holding an internal workshop and just letting people know what you're trying to do with social media, maybe, where your LinkedIn page is, where your Facebook business page is, and kind of telling them what you're trying to accomplish and soliciting their support, and, just keeping it positive, and maybe, having a little bit of a talk about kind of the negative consequences. Like, you don't want to begin the situation where you're basically telling them what they can and can't put on there, because you don't really have the right to that. But you may want to talk to them a little bit about some of the consequences to the company for doing that kind of thing, and then hopefully they'll be guided accordingly.
Yeah, I think that's all you can do. You can just lay it out there. Obviously there's internal standards, but yeah, all you can do is kind of just lay it out there, lay it in the hope that your employees and that you have the type of internal culture that they're going to do the right thing in the end.
Right. All right. So listen, I have a couple more questions. Oh, perfect. So you're back here now. I'm assuming, if somebody on here that isn't like this, then raise your hand. But I'm assuming that everybody on here now that has a business has a website and has a social media presence and is doing things on somewhat of a regular basis to kind of put the word out and get the visibility and things like that. Let's just say, and we'll use me, okay? I've got a website, I've got profiles on half a dozen different social sites, I have a YouTube site, I've been out there doing this for a while. How do I use your system, your approach to validating or evaluating my brand? Where do I start in terms of looking at everything that's out there now to figure out if I have any inconsistencies or holes or things like that?
Well, I think if you have that much content, that much stuff out there, what you need to do is almost kind of go to somebody else and say, look at this and tell me what you think about my personal brand. And, we can sort of look in the mirror all we want and say, this is who I am, this is how I represent myself, this is the tone and all that. But sometimes we need somebody from the outside, whether it be a close friend or a colleague or somebody in that space that can look at the body of work and say, okay, based off of what I see, I think this is how you come across. And based off of that, as long as you don't run into a corner with your head in your hands and say, oh my God, what have I done? You can probably look at it and say, all right, so I think I can formulate my personal brand as X, Y, and Z. And I think I'm good at A, B, and C. And then that's where you just start to kind of put together an outline of what my personal brand actually is. And then you go and develop it out from there.
Now, as part of your business, do you offer any kind of an initial service that could help somebody to get a professional assessment of how they show up on the internet?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we could do that. It's something that can do exactly, what I said, take a look at who you are. I'm not a licensed therapist or anything, but I could definitely, from a branding perspective, take a look at it and say, okay, what are you putting out there? And what do I think is your personal value proposition that we could build upon?
All right. So for people that have been out there dabbling around and trying to market themselves on, either on the internet in general, on certain social media platforms, based on what you see and what you work with, what are some of the biggest missteps that people make and may not realize it?
I would say, probably one of the biggest mistakes, and the fact that people, it was sort of a race just to get your face out there and get your voice out there, that you kind of look back and you say, if I had to do it all again, I probably would have developed more of a solid plan before I even put my face on camera or I started putting content out there so that I could really be consistent from day one. Now, obviously, we can't change what's out there. And so I think probably the biggest misstep is kind of rushing it out there and not realizing that it's hard to reel back some of the things that you do. And I'm not saying that what's out there is bad, but when we're talking about consistency, that's really the main thing, is making sure from day one, you are who you are and you are what you represent by day 50, and that it's really the same. So I would encourage, if somebody hasn't put themselves out there yet, make sure that branding plan and that business plan, marketing plan is solidly in place before you flip on the camera or before you hit publish for the first time.
All right. Any other questions? Anybody have anything they want to throw out at this point?
I have a question. So I know you went through a lot of key elements to branding. So if you want to evaluate your branding and start implementing all of these key elements and making sure that we have them all in place, what would you say is the number one, like out of all the elements, what is the number one most important part that we should focus on first before moving into everything else that would basically have an impact in our branding? Did that make sense?
Yeah. I would say it's probably the combination of your value proposition and your target audience. Because I think people waste a lot of time, by, like I said before, not really being real about who your target audience is, and being afraid that your target audience might be too small and too niche. And then you try to be everything to everybody else. And then the other thing, as far as value proposition, you really do need to have that elevator pitch prepared. And some people that get into get into their own company and they branch out, they know what it is up here, but they're not necessarily able to articulate it. So I think you clearly, I mean, it is the classic elevator speech. You need to be able to give that 1 minute speech about what your value proposition is and who your target audience really is. And if you have those down, so much will flow from there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you too that in some of the work that I've done with clients from a marketing strategy standpoint, really honing in and clarifying your value proposition can be extraordinarily difficult because people tend to want to go wide and not very deep. Mm-hmm. To Kevin's point, they're trying to cover as many bases as they can, but they end up with either an elevator pitch or a USP or something that they've got on their website and other places that just doesn't speak to anybody. It's too bland, it's too global. And so you really have to spend the time really dialing it in to be able to come to a point where you can say, this is what I offer, and I know nobody else does this, or nobody else is talking about this. And until you can get to that point, pretty much everything you put out there, you can answer it by saying, well, gee, am I the only one doing that? No. And if no is the answer, then you got to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, and another word that just came to me as well is ensuring you're authentic. And I know that sometimes we're afraid to be our authentic selves, and not to get too psychological about this, but it's about accepting who you are personally, especially if you're the face of your brand. And because if you're not authentic, and by association, if your company is not authentic, people sniff it out like that. And I think whether you think you're too quirky or you're too this or too that, there are people that love that. They love that sort of thing. So if you're the face of your company and you think, oh, I'm a little too quirky, I'm not the typical spokesperson when it comes to this, don't worry about that. As long as you're authentic and you own who you are, the right people will fall in love with that. And the right people will buy into that authenticity and they'll keep on coming back. If you're not authentic, it's just not going to endure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's so important to make sure people understand who you are and just as importantly, who you're not.
Yeah.
Quite often when people are asking me about my business, I'll tell them, I'm looking for somebody that is more into life coaching or relationship coaching or things of that nature. There's plenty of people out there. I'm not that person. If you're not tethered to a business somehow, there's no reason for me to be working with you. And I've just learned over time that if I don't draw the line, I get people coming in well-meaning, but looking for stuff that I can't provide.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the other side of that too is that if you know what you are not and people come to you for that, and you're actually able to possibly refer them out to somebody who can help them, that's valuable as well. So just being honest with them saying, hey, I can't help you, but this other person here can. And not only does that come back on the karma train, but it is also something that, at the end of the day, a lot of us are trying to provide solutions. And I think that you realize that if you are not able to provide the solution, but you're able to refer them off to somebody that you trust who will be, it's going to come back to you in the form of referral or just good karma.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Other questions? Does anybody have a question or a comment and maybe some personal experience regarding this that they want to share?
I had a question, kind of comment. So you're just kind of talking about it, but it's kind of like how much is sometimes your brand, and then I heard sometimes people have similar products and they're not really sometimes buying that product, they're buying you. So I see all that being authentic, real, things like that. And I'm not sure sometimes how much is the brand and how much is it you. What would you kind of respond to that? Because a lot of times I'm impressed with someone and I'm like, okay, I want to do business with this person. Even if I maybe don't like the company as much, I like that person. So how much are you selling yourself? And then how much, what's the balance of the brand or the corporation or company backing you?
Well, I would say if you're working for a company and it's not your own company and it's not your personal brand that you're selling, uh, you are leveraging your personal brand to get your foot in the door. So ultimately, you want them to like Jeff. You want them to be able to believe in Jeff. Uh, and the company has entrusted you to represent them. So they know what Jeff, I keep on using your name. Sorry, I'm just trying to give an example here. But the the reps that they send out there, they know what you're about. You have to get in your mind that they have trusted that I am a good literal representative of a company, and that if I leverage my personal brand and what makes me unique and what gets my foot in the door, then it's you can figure out a way to connect that. So there have you would when you work for a company, you always want to know what their core values are. And hopefully you work for a company where they do sort of tell everybody, hey, this is our core values, this is what we operate from. Then you look at that and you say, okay, uh, for instance, with Aeronet Worldwide, it's integrity, commitment, passion. If you want to tap into where you say, okay, the company exudes a passion for the industry, I exude a passion. So let's try to match up that passion. If our customers or my prospects see the passion that I show for the company, they're going to know that I'm connecting them with a company that also has a passion for providing solutions and getting stuff done. So I think it's about matching what it is that makes you unique, and your personal brand with the corporate brand that has been already established.
Good. That's a good question, Jeff.
Yeah, and the reason that's a good answer. Thanks, Kevin. And just one other comment, it's like, because I'm in a financial services agency, I'm independent, but at the same time, there's over like 50,000 agents in our company. So 2 or 3 of those screw up or do something wrong or whatever, with media and social media, it's like, oh, I checked out your company online and found this. Well, that's such a small percentage. Plus, in my line of business, you screw up too bad, your license is gone, or you can go to jail or sued or other things. So it's in the financial industry, it's very regulated, like California Department of Insurance or whatever state you're in. So sometimes that gives a bad rap. So sometimes I might stay away from, the bigger brand. And we have brands within a brand. I have my Revolution Financial shirt on, which is part of our brand. So I usually, that's on my business cards, things like that. We have a bigger company owned by another company owned by a Dutch company called Aegon. So it's sometimes kind of balancing. And then my own personal, website, things like that. We call it, we refer to as business media. And that's another question, have your social media for yourself, but then have a business media. Is that important to kind of separate?
Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of balls in the air there. So you've got sort of a corporate turducken going on, company within a company, or maybe like an inception sort of thing. So I think in those cases where you have companies, you have subsidiaries, you really need to just, in black and white, map it out. And each company is going to have its own set of core values. It's going to have its own set of pros and cons. And I think to your point, where in one particular industry where the stakes are so high, where potential screw ups can lead to the loss of a license, can lead to bad online reputation, I think you need to be more meticulous with training your employees as far as what they say, how they say it, and where they say it. And because reputation management is a bear, it's once it gets out there, it's hard to reel it back. There are companies that will charge a lot of money to try to scrub out bad reviews, bad press out of search rankings, and it's a long process. You don't want to get to that point. So I think the higher the stakes, the more you have to double down on internal education as far as making sure that your people are staying compliant. But as far as, what you were talking about is, kind of balancing, or I should say not balancing. I think you just need to really look, if you've got multiple companies, multiple corporations, you need to really lay it out in black and white. What do each stand for? And just be real meticulous about that and try to avoid the crossover and the confusion.
Sure. Thank you.
Sue, I noticed you joined us just a few minutes ago. I thought I'd give you an opportunity, if you want, just to introduce yourself to the rest of the group.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I am a certified hypnotherapist, and I help people with bad habits. So if you know of anybody or you happen to have one yourself, I'm the gal to go to and help you get over that in one session. Results guaranteed.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a huge pond out there for you to fish in.
Yes, that's what my daughter Jennifer